when you know somebody that has special needs, just be really slow to assume. Like assume a diagnosis,
Yes.
assume a situation, just ask questions.
Yes.
That's the safest play. And you have to be willing to, because there's some people that want to be known as the expert on everything. And so they just think that they're going to be the expert on special needs because they read an article or whatnot. And anyways, just lay down your pride. Don't assume you know the story, the diagnosis, the struggle, and just ask questions.
On this episode of the Maven Parent Podcast, we have an interview. And I would normally say we have a special interview, but then I started thinking about that, and that would mean if this was a special interview, then our other interviews weren't special. And then it dawned on me, every interview we do is special.
Which means that none of them are.
Which means, whatever. And so I want our guests today to feel like they are special. And so even though I'm not calling it a special interview, it is a special interview.
It is a special interview because for the first time, we're interviewing a couple on the Maven Parent Podcast. Because so far we've just interviewed one other person.
So it is more special than the other interviews.
It is more special.
And this couple is Mike and Terri Sherrard, who have been good friends for a long time, and who we have done some ministry. Mike and I in particular have done ministry alongside each other through just a whole bunch of different things. Mike is pastored. Mike is now the president of, well, I'll let him introduce the organization because the organization has gone through some transition, but a great parachurch organization. And anyway, welcome, Mike and Terri. We're so glad you guys are on the podcast with us.
Well, that was a delightfully awkward introduction. And I think this is really special because you made us wait for 37 minutes before we got started. So this is really special. This may be I don't know if this is your first. I don't know if this is how you always treat your guests, Brett, but
no, only our friends.
Way, this is really special.
Okay, let's not get into the backstory of the delay here. The audience didn't need to know that, but they do.
Oh my gosh.
This is just real life. Okay, Mike, Terri, give us just the quick bio on you guys to give a little context, what you're doing, how you're involved in ministry right now.
Well, it was a cool evening back in 2001 when we've been married for a number of years. Do you know how many?
You have to give.
Do you know how many?
You have to give the number if you're going to say.
Because you don't know. Well, we were married in 2004. We got an anniversary coming up here in September. We've got 5 kids. Been in ministry for a while, like you'd mentioned, pastoring. About a year and a half ago, I accepted the offer to take the role as the president of the C.S. Lewis Society. But like what you had said, we've gone through a rebranding approach. And coming this fall, we'll be relaunched as Apologetics, Inc. The C.S. Lewis Society has actually always been incorporated under that name, has apologetics.org. And what we've started to build over the last couple of years is a platform approach to apologetics ministry, various ministry initiatives, various podcasts, a speaking team. And it just makes a lot more sense to bring this Apologetics, Inc. out of the background and make it the parent organization. So we've been working on that the last year and excited to see the fruit of that. And it's going to go live here in the fall.
Yeah, and excited as you and I have talked about what you guys are doing. I think it's going to really serve the church well. Just while we are talking about it, give us a URL. Where if someone wants to find you guys, where do they go?
Apologetics.org. That easy.
Okay. All right.
So we know that part of your background, though, too, is also in the pastorate and church ministry. You guys have served vocationally in the local church. Also, of course, you're doing the C.S. Lewis Society now, but still heavily involved in the local church and serving your community. So I know that'll end up coming out as we talk about your family and your story. But so for both of you, maybe you could just quickly tell your story of growing up and coming to Christ, when did that happen for both of you?
Yeah, for me, I was young. I was 7 or 8. I think that's when I accepted Christ, but I didn't fully understand what that meant. I'd heard the Bible stories, I'd answer the questions, and I got all the questions right. But I didn't understand the word Christian. So I actually thought when I became a Christian that I was in the youth group. Real funny story. My brother was in the youth group, and I was talking to the youth minister's daughter about what's a Christian. That word, for whatever reason, I did not connect it with all the other knowledge that I had. And she's, giving me questions, and I'm answering all of them, and I'm still not understanding. Like, I got all these questions, but Christian. She's like, "Oh, you want to talk to my dad?" And I'm like, "No, I just want to know what a Christian is." She goes and grabs the youth minister. And so he, leads me to Christ. We say the prayer. I'm still like, I know all of this. And then he's like, "All right." He's like, "You're a Christian." So I thought with him being the youth minister, I'm in the youth group. This is great. And my parents realized later when we have to have a clarifying conversation, when I pitched a fit that I didn't get to go on the youth trip, I kept saying, "But I'm a Christian." So they were like, "Okay, we have to talk to her." But they went through the questions. I understood sin. I understood what Jesus did for me. But it didn't really become real until my freshman year of college. That's when I had to decide, am I going to read my Bible? Am I going to pray? Am I going to have this relationship with God that I've known all the right answers, and I know the role, and I know how to look and what to say and play the part, but now I'm on my own. And so that's when my faith became real, when I decided I do want to have this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Freshman year of college.
So it's also when you met.
It is when I met you.
So would you say that?
I was dating someone when I met him.
So not only did you ask Jesus into your heart, but you also asked Mike Sherrard into your heart. Is that what happened?
No, I was not interested in this guy. I thought he had really pretty eyes. I thought he had really pretty eyes. I was dating a guy, pretty serious, and I was not interested at first.
So Mike had to woo you.
And we know how that story ends.
Mike won.
So I don't remember a time not believing in Jesus, and that forgiveness of sins comes by faith in him. I grew up in a really good home, a mom and dad that loved Jesus, and it wasn't just a cultural kind of expression for them. They really believed in God's word. They really lived it, saw that modeled. And that's the home that I grew up in. And so when people ask me, why are you a Christian? Part of that answer is I saw it lived out from my mom and dad. And from an early age, I believed that it was true. So, I've gotten involved in apologetics ministry over the last, 15 years. But what drew me to apologetics wasn't that I had a crisis of faith myself. It was that I saw it as a tool to help other people find the life that comes from believing in what is true, namely the abundant life found in Jesus Christ. So for years, I was embarrassed of my testimony. I was like, I wish I had a really, amazing testimony of being this horrible person that the Lord got a hold of and changed my life. But of course, over time, and now especially with my own kids, I view it as a gift that my dad's faithfulness and my mom's faithfulness was passed on, in a sense, almost like an inheritance of mine. Now, of course, that doesn't say that you become a Christian just because your parents are, but I really benefited from that home that I grew up in, and through an early age, believed in the truthfulness of the gospel, and then have spent literally the rest of my life trying to understand it better and learn how to tell other people about it.
I'm curious, Mike, as you think about growing up in your home, and you mentioned a couple of times seeing your parents live it out. I'm just curious. I mean, it is a parent podcast, so it's good to hear stories of encouragement, I think, for parents or parents who are trying to raise kids who weren't discipled. And sometimes we're like, what does this look like? So I'm curious, when you think about, okay, my parents really lived it out, what were some of the things that just pop in your mind, things you saw in your parents that made that impact?
I love this question because the answer is going to be so simple, but I actually think that's really helpful because it's things that
Mhm.
I now simple things. Whenever we would go on a family vacation, first thing my dad would do before the car left the driveway, he would pray for a safe trip and for a good time with his family. Such a simple thing, right? But it's a kind of act that helps me as a kid understand the place of faith and the Lord in our lives, that everything revolves around him. And so it wasn't just like this prayer, this cliche thing because we really don't want to, get hurt on the way down. Of course, that's part of it, but it was a way just to show the centrality of our faith in everything we do. So Christmas morning, similar thing. Before we could get to open our presents. And we open presents the civilized way, by the way, where we watch one person open it. We don't just do this mad rush. And in fact, we were forbidden from playing with other kids who that was their tradition. But anyhow, um, and that's an obvious lie here. But before any of that happened, we had to wait for my dad to get his coffee, and he always took plenty of time doing that. And then he would sit down and he would read from the Bible. So simple things like that. I saw my parents pray. I saw their Bible out, opened, and in different places. So I knew, I don't know that I ever literally just walked in and saw them reading the Bible. I'm sure I did. I don't remember that, but it was everywhere.
Hmm.
And my mom, especially, well, she was a pray mom and she would tell us this. And she told us this story all the time that she would pray that the Lord would be the parent to us that she and my mom never could be. She knew that we would go places that she wouldn't know about. We would do things that she would only find out after the fact. And so, even from a young age, I think my mom understood that she was stewarding her children more than she could own or control their lives. And a part of a faithful steward there was to pray and ask for the Lord to do more than she ever could. So I never got away with anything. And it wasn't because I think my parents were the most clever. I really think the Lord honored my mom's prayer. And I
Mhm.
would get caught for things that I'm like, there's no way I should have gotten caught for that. I'm not an idiot, or maybe I'm not as clever as I think I am. But anyhow, so it's just, again,
Yeah.
getting long
Yes.
winded there. It was simple things. It wasn't
Mhm.
like we had the weekly family worship night and all that kind of stuff. Not that maybe I'm saying that mockingly, and I don't intend to, but it was through smaller things that worked their way into everyday kind of just. It was a normal part of our life in simple, small ways. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Mm.
Okay, so you guys are both believers. You meet in college. Terry falls in love with your eyes. That's
I
enough
mean,
to
how
build a
could she
marriage
not, right?
on. You build a marriage on that. You now have 5 kids. Okay, so you guys are parents together. Tell us about kind of your journey into parenthood. How has it been from the beginning for you? Is it, worse than you thought, better than you thought, challenging? Tell us about your journey into parenthood.
Um, uh, Harder than I thought, which seems ridiculous, right? No one should think parenting's going to be easy, but definitely harder than I thought. Um, we didn't plan 5 per se, so that's another harder than I thought. I never imagined we were going to have 5. I think we pretty much were thinking 3 kids, but if you look at the ages of our children, the biggest gap is between Caden, who's born second, and our third, who's Kylie, because we were trying to decide, do we want to have 3 kids? So it's really funny because I don't know how we went from trying to decide, do we want to have 3, and we just went for the basketball team. Um, but it harder than I thought for sure. Maybe it's the sheer number, and maybe it's just like no one really knows how hard parenting is until you get in it, and then you're just like, this is really difficult. Um, we used to say that I said that going from 1 to 2 was harder. I don't know if we still stand by this. You said that going from 2 to 3 was harder.
After 5, it's all a blur to me.
We used to talk about what was the hardest transition. That's what 1 to 2 was hard because they were 18 months apart. And then it was like there's no nap time because one's running around while one's napping and everybody's on different schedules. 2 to 3 was like I was like fine. 3 to 4 was fine. Now 4 to 5, we both have agreed that was crazy. Which I think that first year of her life is just like complete blur. Um,
So
but
how
yeah,
did you guys decide to have 5? I mean, was it a conscious decision that you made, or was it I mean, it sounds like maybe when you were first married you thought, "Oh, maybe 2 or
3.
3."
Yeah.
3. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
with each child, neither one of us felt comfortable with stopping or doing anything permanent.
mm,
It's not just a feeling. There was also part of it was also rational, but it was also a feeling. I guess you would say it was both of those. And so, especially after the fourth child after Conrad, um,
We number
mm.
them all.
I
Yeah,
think
we do that too.
we both would have expected to be done, but neither of us felt okay about this. And so
Mm,
we started asking some friends, and just we've always done, I think, a good job of inviting other people into our life to get advice and counsel and have people pray. So we wanted some help in how to make this decision. And we kept getting the stupidest answer from everyone. They would all just say the same thing. You just know. Like we'd ask, how did you
We're
know?
not done.
How did you know that it was okay for you to stop having kids? And they would all say, oh, you just know. It's like, well, how do you know? Oh, you just know. Well, we don't know. Well, then you're not done. Like, just why don't we have smarter friends? This is not.
It would make me so angry. I was like, no, we are done. Like I've had 4 kids. I'm done. I need someone to tell me that I'm done. And they're like, but if you don't know, and I'm like, well, we don't know. Well, then you're not done. I was like, no, I'm done.
So I especially needed something more to go on than just waiting till you feel a certain way or whatever. So I remember
mm,
talking to our friend Scott Klusendorf about this, and Scott helped me think through kind of a rational, somewhat objective way to go about making this decision related to things like health, um, callings in life, and won't go through all of that now, but it was really helpful. So we come up with this plan of how do we know when we're going to call it quits, if you will. And so put this plan in place basically. And long and the short of this, I was out having a drink with a friend of mine. Conrad is about 9 months old at this point, and I turned to my friend and I go, man, I think it's time. I think I'm done. And part of it was the thought of having another child, going through, diapers and all that kind of stuff. It was just overwhelming. And he's like, that's a big decision. You sure? I said, yeah, I think I'm going to go home. I'm going to go home and tell Terri that I'm done. Well, I get home. She's asleep. I get up the next day early for work, go off. We don't talk. The next time we do talk, she's on the phone with me bawling because she's pregnant with number 5. And then we knew. And then we knew. And all of our friends' advice proved true. We knew. This is the end. We can't handle anymore.
So it
So
turns out your friends weren't as dumb as you thought.
they were because we know.
So that-
Yeah, I called a lady that's kind of like another grandma to our kids, Sherry B, and she comes over and I'm sobbing. Mike's not home yet, and she's like, "What is it?" And I hold out the pregnancy test, and she kept our kids a lot for us so we could just have a moment. She looks at me. She's like, "I can do 5. I can do 5. Bless her soul." And I said, "I can't do 5." I'm really glad you can do 5. But we just knew at that point this baby was supposed to be number 5, but number 5 is where we are done.
Well, that's I love you guys sharing your story. I mean, you're just real. It helps, I think, families to maybe just take a deep what do you call it? A deep breath or a sigh of relief. It's a sigh of relief for families who we sometimes get these pictures like family life it's picture perfect. It's this dream scenario. You have everything planned out. There's no conflict. You're just so happy about, everything that comes along. But it's good to hear That's just not the way it is for most of us,
Yeah.
if not all of us. And so it's refreshing to hear your story. Now, you guys, your oldest son is Erin, and Erin has some special needs. So tell us about that journey. When did you start noticing something was different about Erin?
Yeah, go ahead.
We go for so as the mom, there are things that I noticed. Moms do have this thing, mom gut, like we know, and
Mhm.
there are things that I noticed in his first year of life, but they weren't big things. But it was like, I don't know. Little things like crawling wasn't really happening, but he was trying, and it was like and I had my best friend of mine had a baby within weeks, of each other, Erin and MT. And I would watch MT and I would compare, and I'd be like, but MT's crawling, and Erin would do the funniest thing. We gave it names like fish out of water. He would hold his arms behind him and kick his feet. Like, why aren't I moving like MT? And I'm like, why
Yeah.
can't he crawl? So that was a little thing. It was kind of funny, but it was like, but it should be happening. He should be crawling. um, I noticed he almost was too easy. He was just the easiest baby. He didn't cry
Mm.
hardly, he didn't fight unless it was like, I need to eat. But things entertained him too forever. Like he could look at all the mobiles and he could swing. And I was just like, you're so easy, which is not a complaint, but it's another one of those, oh no. As he started to crawl, he got it pretty quickly and then he skipped it almost. Like he didn't do it like a lot of kids will crawl around for a couple months. We kind of skipped that, started to pull up, and then walking was like, is he going to be able to walk by one? I don't know, because you're looking at all the milestones. And then he does. He walks like right at his first birthday. And so you're like, okay, well, that's nothing. Then he was very clumsy. Just the nursery worker, we would joke around. This sounds harsh, but she loved him dearly. She was like, he's the drunk baby. Like, he just he just didn't have his balance. He would look down at the ground and just take off running. And you're like, Aaron, look. And I don't know what all that, but it's just more of like something. Walked on
Mm.
his toes a lot, which 15 years ago, autism was not, we didn't know as much, but that was one of the like tall tale signs. Like there were, I don't know why.
Mm.
So I'm Googling autism and I'm like, it's not autism. And then the biggest thing that I kind of just started really talking to the pediatrician about was speech. His speech was just a one-word man, like drink, outside, cup, car. I mean, it was just, but he could comprehend like everything that I would read about autism 15 years ago was.
And at this point, his younger sister, Kaden, 18 months younger, is just talking circles,
Yeah.
paragraphs, and
Hmm.
Aaron's just one word. So with that contrast also is another.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when he should have been doing sentences or phrases, 2-word phrases, and he wasn't. So it was really confusing because he understood like I could say, Aaron, go get your shoes. We're going for a ride. And he'd do it. And what I kept reading about autism then was like, they're very, like, they're not with you. They're in another world. Like then, I know it's changed, but so I was like, well, that's not what this is. Like he comprehends so much. But Kaden, yeah, we joke with Kaden because they're 18 months apart and Kaden is a girl. So her development was typical, sometimes way faster than Erin. And Kaden came out with phrases. Kaden didn't have a first word. She had first sentences. And I was like, what in the world? Like, I remember her walking in the bathroom with her sippy cup and she said, I want milk. And I was like, what? You're supposed to say drink. Like, I called Mike at work and I'm like, Kaden wants milk. And he's like, give her milk. And I was like, she just said a whole sentence. So we started to notice speech.
Yeah. And so with Aaron, nothing was, so he's been called the drunk baby. We affectionately call him our crack kid. And because he always falls through the crack.
Yeah.
Like this diagnosis didn't work. This diagnosis didn't work. There's this group of people in support and, even care. But Aaron just never fit. And so it was really maybe a 10-year or more kind of quest to figure out what's going on with Erin. His disabilities manifest, like we said, speech, cognitive disability. He was clumsy, but you can have a catch with Erin now, and he can hit a baseball and things like that. And the long and the short of this story, what we found was 4 years ago now, 3 years ago.
He was 11 and he's 15.
Yeah, so 4 years ago, through some genetic testing, we found that he has an incredibly rare genetic disorder. It's so rare, it doesn't even have a name. It's just a mutation of the KCNB1 gene. There's roughly 100 people in the world that have this. And with the prevalence of genetic testing, you can just do, probabilities, see that it's still rare. It's not like there's a bunch of people that have this that it just hasn't been found out. I mean, there's most certainly more than just 100, but we're not talking millions of people have this. It's unbelievably rare, so there's not a whole lot of money that's poured into this. In fact, when we learned of this diagnosis, that he has this genetic mutation, we do the research. Terri finds these medical journals. We read up on it. We get in to see some geneticists at Emory. That usually takes about a year to see this, to see new patients or whatnot. But because of the rarity of Erin's, disorder, that they bring us in simply to tell us everything we already knew, and then to receive from them the invitation of, please come back when you learn more about this. So it's just rare, a lonely place in this regard. And even so, like we're talking about Erin being this crack kid, even within this KCNB1 world, he's still kind of unique, but in a good way. The majority of kids that have this, it's terminal or severely debilitating, where they have uncontrollable seizures. They're nonverbal. They can't feed themselves, bathe themselves, or do any of this. And Erin, again, he'll have a conversation with you about the Braves and Chris Tomlin and Metallica, and then play catch with you or whatnot. So it is, so it's funny how it's so rare, and even within this rare group, Erin's still a bit of an outlier. So, that's
so. Is it, for those of us who aren't familiar with that diagnosis, is it under the umbrella of autism? Is it kind of in that world, or it's totally, once you started digging in, they were like, oh no, this is totally not autism. It's different.
Symptoms can manifest itself in ways that would fall under an autism kind of diagnosis, but that's not, it's just not what Erin, it's not what Erin has. So KCNB1 is separate from it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are some individuals in the group that have gotten that diagnosis. Like it fits them more. If that, like they have the KCNB1 disorder, but they also have an autism diagnosis. And it fits.
Okay.
Erin's presentation, if you will, just doesn't fit. Like we've done, evaluations, and we'll probably continue. And it always comes up because in some ways it would open up another world, another community if we kind of got that diagnosis. It just doesn't fit Erin. It just doesn't. It doesn't. And services that you could get if you got it, but we just can't get that for him. It just doesn't fit for him.
Well, one thing in your guys' story, just as Brett and I mean, you guys are outside Atlanta. We're on the other side of the country, so we don't get to see you guys very often. But one thing that I have definitely noticed about your story, and you in particular, Terri, is how just in the 5 or 6 years that we've known you guys, or probably maybe longer, just the fierce devotion to figure out what is going on with your son. Of course, this is both of you. But in you, Terri, just this, there's this mama bear thing that people talk about. And usually it's like kind of a negative thing. Like it's a mom like attacking someone who's like coming after their kid or something. But there is something about moms and the fierce love we have for our babies. And I've seen it in other moms too. And I just want you to share a little bit about the story, because like you said, Mike, when you guys went to that appointment with Erin, you knew more than the doctors did. And that's what I mean. Like I know these moms whose kids have different issues and struggles and challenges. They know more than the MDs do sometimes. And I'm not saying that to put down the MDs. I'm saying that to highlight this unique way that God has created moms. And so, Terri, just share a little bit about what you went through in your frustration, even of getting a diagnosis, and some of the things you had to do to really fight for Erin.
That's a loaded question.
Right. The banner under which the story falls is fight.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. And especially well, in our case, which isn't always the case for other families with special needs, ours is so niche, I mean, rare, that
Mm-hmm.
it falls outside of clinical medicine, if you will, in practices. And so for us, especially, you'll get a lot of short answers, dismissiveness, or people just don't know. So you've got to fight. Now, that notion of fighting for your kid isn't, of course, just relevant to our unique situation because of its rarity. And that is something that Terri did really well. And you aren't wrong to point her out more than me. She definitely would have the sleepless nights of researching, and then not taking no for an answer from whether it's an insurance company or somebody in the medical profession. And the way that you fight this, of course, isn't with, a foul mouth and yelling and screaming. It's just with
Although sometimes you do. I'm just kidding.
it's with a hardened resolve. And Terri certainly did that. So
Mm-hmm.
I interrupted your question.
She was just, no, that was good. It was way more concise. You can edit. I'll probably get long. I'll try to condense it. Yes.
Yeah,
you
even
just
if there's
fight.
just a couple stories, Terri, like
You
that you
just-
think of. Yeah.
You just, like you were saying, God made moms in a different way. And I mean, along with the genetic disorder, we got, he may have seizures. So we do an EEG, and then I get, well, he doesn't really have seizures, so we're not going to do a longer EEG. And I'm like, we have to do a longer EEG. So you ask for that, and then you get that, and then you find out that was the right call from a neurologist. Good call, Mom. He has.
Yeah, so we had the neurologist that was dismissive
Yep.
of doing a 5-day video EEG in the hospital because Erin hadn't had clinical seizures yet, which is basically just an observable seizure. And then the same neurologist come back later saying, "Oh, nice call, good decision." So it's again,
Which makes you feel so alone because you feel the weight of, what if I had not pushed? What if I had not asked? What if I had, and I don't know how long, he's 11, how long has he been having these clinical misfiring at night, and medication could have helped. And now, it just feels, so you fight and you also try to rest in God's goodness and that God knows Erin better than I do. And that I can't sit here and claim that I have done well. I have tried, but I can't say that I have done that very well. I hope he's 15, the next 15 years I'll do that better. But yeah, you just, when you try to rest in God knows him better. And then you just try to take the next step and the next step. The immune system issues, he has immune system issues. We found out almost simultaneously with the genetic disorder that he has Hashimoto's. And so his immune system attacks his thyroid. And you're told there's nothing you can do but give him thyroid medicine. And I'm like, that can't be right. That can't be right. And so you find a doctor that says, I'll help you look for why his immune system is attacking the thyroid. And you just try. And sometimes you have to live in that world of, I'm just going to try. We may not be able to fix this. We may not be able to fix his immune system doing what it's doing, but we can try. And so you fight, and we've done a lot to help his immune system. So yeah, it's just fight and rest.
Hey, tell us about some of the challenges that you guys have faced with Erin, but we want to kind of break it into 3 spheres for just families to hear about some of the challenges that you guys have faced. But of course, there's the challenges in the home. There's challenges in the church, in your church community, and then challenges within your school or education. What are some of the challenges you guys have faced in those different spheres?
Well, the challenges in the home, one, Terry, even just picking up with where Terry left off, that fight in a mama to find an answer can also just exhaust you because you're always left with, what haven't we tried? What journal is out there that you haven't come across? So that what Terry said, that fighting for rest and peace is a for real fight in the home. The other one is if you have other kids, you've become burdened with the amount of resource, money, time that gets put into one child, and you feel like you've neglected the others. Like one that I carry with me, or I don't carry it with me so much now, but I did for some time with our older daughter, Kaden. Growing up, she, like all of our kids, was just crazy athletic, but we really weren't able to pour into that a lot, the typical ways American families would pour into athletics. And Kaden is about as clumsy as you can get right now. I'm kidding. So it's a silly thing where it's like, young, I had these, I could see Kaden thriving in sports. And of course it's silly in a sense where, like, growing up in an American context, especially, like, athletic success is the definition of a meaningful life or something like that. But you carry these things with you as a parent. Like, did I not cultivate a gift in my daughter because of everything we were doing for our son? And we had some friends whose daughter gave their mom a gift where the mom was who had a son with special needs, and then talking to her daughter about saying, "Hey, I'm sorry that I wasn't there for you," kind of thing. And the daughter turned to her mom and said, "What are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I saw everything you gave for my brother, and you should have done that." And so it's okay, which was helpful for us to hear. And I think it's allowed us to not carry so heavily that guilt or that burden of what are we not pouring into our other kids because of the amount of time this takes. I will say something on that too, though. As our kids have gotten older, I actually think the amount of energy, if you will, that Erin takes is a gift in itself to our other kids. It cultivates things in them that wouldn't be cultivated otherwise. And so I think it is, in a sense, an unexpected gift. So that's some of the challenges in the home.
What are some of those things you've noticed, Mike, that have been cultivated in your kids that is because they have a brother who has
the
special
ability
needs?
the ability to see people the world doesn't. So there's, whether it's somebody else with special needs or something else that's different, the world does a good job of ignoring people, right? And you can think of this example, like if you see somebody with a physical, something physically wrong, like they're missing a limb or whatever, that I want to look, but I don't want to look. I see you, but I don't see you. How you'll kind of like, I can't stare, I can't look. So people with special needs, there are people in this world that are almost invisible to other people because that's how they're treated. And to see this, especially with our oldest daughter, that gift of being able to see people that the world is leaving behind and ignoring, I think that's a huge gift. Yeah, Conrad too.
Baseball buddy.
Oh, yeah, that's a great story. So, be a little bit, we've seen this in Conrad where he went out
And
of
he's
his
your youngest, right?
youngest son,
Youngest son.
to where he just, the one kid that would be easily left behind was tethered to Conrad's hip, if you will, for an entire day. Conrad just leading this kid around and making sure he had as much fun as everybody else.
Yeah.
So that'd be one big way, anyways.
So what are some of the challenges you guys have experienced with school?
Well, again, for us, and I don't know how universal this is for families with special needs, but for us, it's just been like every year, what's the right school option for Erin? He started out in public school, and the public school in our area has some good resources. But then it seemed like, okay, maybe they can't quite give Erin what he needs. So then we looked into private options, which of course are ridiculously expensive. And I don't know about you, Brett, but a life of ministry and apologetics isn't necessarily the most lucrative field.
What do you mean?
I've been telling you, you need to write a book that starts with the case for something, and then you might be okay.
Yeah. Well, I picked one that was almost as like just called Why You Mattered. And, you would have thought that might, but maybe you got to be a better writer than I don't know. So the school finding the right fit. So for a child with special needs, it's going to be both. Do they have the expertise to help educationally? What's the social environment? And your experience could be you find a place that's good in one, maybe not great in the other. And so you kind of live in this year by year almost. What's the best thing? And so even this year, we've made another move educationally, and Erin's going to be going back into public school. He's going to go to high school, which he's really actually excited about this.
So excited.
But when we're making this decision, it feels like you're just almost gambling because there's just so many unknowns. And as much as you investigate and research and talk, there's still just an element of unknown. And when it's your kid, it can be nerve-wracking to say the least. So, but fortunately with Erin, one of the challenges we've not had to this point is any kind of bullying. And so that's been that's been very nice that Erin hasn't experienced that yet.
I mean, minimal. Like it was
not more than anybody else.
No. And it was like little things. Like I would go into, the public school when he was starting kindergarten, first and second grade. And I would notice, some kids that would make Erin do something silly and then they would laugh, but they weren't laughing with Erin. They were laughing at Erin, but Erin didn't see it. I saw it. So, that was good because it didn't hit Erin as you're getting bullied. They were just being, silly kids. But yeah, we haven't had any, long, heartbreaking, like Erin's aware, just bullying. We haven't had that. So that is one of the concerns of going back to public school, because they do have a lot of programs in public school that are free. A lot of resources that private school doesn't have. So we're kind of trying to take use of that. That's one of the fears of like, what is this going to look like? And we're just going to try, and then we're going to see if we just destroy this boy that has been so a little somewhat protected.
And so going back to like school and family here, one of the challenges is that, so Caden and Erin will be in the same grade. Erin was held back. And when Erin was going into kindergarten, we requested that Erin would not be in Caden's class. And Caden, as a kindergartner was like, why that? I want Erin in my, can I please, I want Erin in my class. And Terry told Caden, no, Erin's not your responsibility. And, but now in high school, Caden is 14, beautiful, smart. I mean, she's just amazing. This decision of Erin going back into public school, we said, okay, things are different. Erin will be your responsibility. And so we want you to make this decision with us. Of course, not placing upon her the full weight of what we do with Erin is you, but no, we need to make this decision with you. And just really proud to see the growth and the maturity in our daughter, Caden, and how she thought through this and how we talked about it and how she's excited. And so like one fun example is Terry's telling Caden, like, hey, if you, you're going to go to prom, Erin's probably going to be going with you. And
if he wants to go, I have no idea. I mean, Erin surprises me. I'll think he's not going to do this, and then he does it, and I'm like, what? So I said, if he wants to go, I mean, he's not going to go by himself. He's going to be going with you.
And then Caden just with a smirk just goes, Mom, he might have a date.
Right. He might.
Oh, okay. So I want to ask about church too. And and then kind of lead into some of the hard stories that have happened too. But how has the church been for you guys as far as having a special needs kid and the challenges that come with trying to live life in the local church and be family with other families and having families and kids that don't understand Erin?
Ours in the church regarding Erin haven't been too bad, and it's partly because of just the role that I had as a pastor, that I can, be a spokesperson, if you will, for children with special needs. And just by virtue of us getting to know a lot more people, because it's quote unquote my job, right? They get to know Erin. And so maybe our story isn't, similar to what others would experience, but some of the things, right? People just don't know what to say. Of course, you would rather them say the wrong thing than say nothing at all, right? But, people will sometimes say things that, are hurtful, and they don't realize that they're hurtful, and you got to take that. A lot of people just don't know what to do. So whether this is the church or even your own family, not true of our families, but they just don't know what to do with someone with special needs. They just don't know what to do. And so it can be lonely, and you can be isolated in that sense, and you can maybe develop some bitterness of all the work and the energy you put into helping your child with special needs adapt to everyone else's life. And if you just thought how much time and energy, what if other people who don't have children with special needs spend a fraction of the time teaching their kids how to bring Erin into their world? How much more effective that would be than us trying to help Erin fit into their world. So that can be a challenge. But when you do have some families that get that, like, I don't think we mentioned it maybe before we started recording it, but our friends, the Hollands, they have done well to get to know Erin, understand his disorder, understand his quirks or whatnot. And then their boys and their daughter, Erin's just Erin. He's just a normal kid in that sense. And so having some families that do understand really helps a ton and gives you a bit of reprieve from some of this other loneliness or the insensitive words of others that might be said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought about this when I kind of saw like maybe a question that might come up, this being one of them. And I thought, our story probably, as far as like the church being really hard for Erin or a challenge, I don't think it's probably normal. It hasn't been that hard. Like, we have had families that have surrounded us and surrounded our kids. And maybe it's, again, because he was the head pastor.
And I do want to pat ourselves on the back, and especially you. We work hard to invite people into our lives.
Yeah.
It's really easy to just be isolated. And one of the things I just got fed up with hearing in the church is I don't have any friends. I'm like, when was the last time you asked somebody over to your house? When was the last time after church you said, hey, let's go get lunch? You think I know looking at us, you might think, well, it's obvious why they have so many friends. But no, we work really hard at building relationships. And some of the fruit of that is they get to know Erin.
Yeah.
And so, maybe I don't know why I'm getting puffed up here and want to pat myself on the back here, but I think we should. And we, in a sense, did hard. It was hard work to invite people into our lives.
Yeah.
And part of the fruit of that is people know Erin, and you don't end up feeling as alone as you would otherwise.
Yeah. And that's not easy. So I guess that is a challenge, but that can be a challenge for any family, right? To have friends and build relationships and have other adults know your kids, whether they have special needs or not. That takes time and effort, and come to my home and come to the baseball game, or come to that is a challenge to anybody, I think. And maybe even more so if you have a child with special needs, because I think you do feel the tendency sometimes to isolate yourself because you're tired, you're just exhausted, and sometimes you just want to protect them as well. And so you're like, what if their kids don't, and so just like, why even spend the energy?
Yeah, it's
worth it.
Right. With children with special needs in the church, you have to you have to lay down the fear of when I invite you over to our house, my son may pee off the balcony, or he may have learned a new word at school and he's just going to wear that out on your guests. So let go of some of that pride, maybe. But that's probably not too big for anybody with kids,
Right.
regardless if they have special needs or not.
Yeah.
Mike, you had said a little bit earlier hurtful things that people say. And it made me think, I wonder what are some are those hurtful things? Can you give some examples of those kind of things? Because I'm guessing there are some people who don't have special needs kids who might think, oh gosh, I don't want to say the wrong thing. What are the wrong things? What are the things that may, whether it's intentional or not, that might be hurtful for a family with a special needs
Yeah,
kid?
I was just gonna say, I think that's why a lot of us will just, like you guys were talking about earlier, where it's just you just move away instead of saying anything. And a lot of times that's just in fear of saying the wrong thing. So I think it is helpful to hear from you guys what have been some hurtful things, because we can grow in our knowledge of how to handle situations. And then with that knowledge, we can pass that on to our kids of, hey, when we do see a kid that has special needs, these are the kinds of questions or things we could say. And these are the things we probably shouldn't say. So all of that to say, what are some hurtful things? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I cut you off there.
No.
I don't have specific, I don't remember. You probably do.
I do.
But well, I'll let you go and then I'll add what I've got after that.
Okay, so so when he was
This is about to be really
this
good.
is about to be really good.
Tell us who said it to.
No,
Let's
No.
get your- let's get
Name
your
names.
Your Facebook. This
no names. And if you see this and you know this is you, I love you dearly. And we talked, and I knew you didn't mean anything. So it was like when Erin was really young, and I think he was first starting school. We're in Fayette County, and I was talking about just some of the challenges with like making sure he's getting what he needs, making sure the expectations high. Like I wanted him to have high expectations. And it was like, well, I did my student teaching in Fayette County, and it's just a real high socioeconomic area. And I was like, I don't understand. She was like, there's a lot of doctors' kids and lawyers' kids, and so they're just not really educated on how to deal with special needs. And I was like, so if I had been a doctor or lawyer, and if Mike had been a doctor or lawyer, or we made more money, our child would not have special needs. Like, I just could not put it into my brain. I was like,
so they were saying because there's smart people in our area, there's not as many kids with special needs.
yes. And so I just could not. I was like, what? So I didn't say anything then, and it just sat with me, and I was like, that just is so, it just, even the thinking, I was like, that's just, so I spoke to her about it, and she responded beautifully. Like, she was like, she didn't even try to explain to me or justify, because she knew it hurt, and I knew she didn't mean it. She basically was just like, I'm not even going to try. You guys are amazing parents. You're phenomenal. Erin is so lucky to have you, which is what you should do. If you say something and then somebody says, hey, that didn't make any sense, or that hurt, don't try to explain. Just, yep, I'm not even going to try to explain. So she could have meant something totally different than the way that I took it and where I was at that moment. But we didn't even dissect it together, if that makes sense.
So that's a good story both ways of, in this, again, it's just not true of family with special needs. We're all going to say something to somebody that hurts them, even unintentionally. And the person hurt has a choice. They can become bitter, they can gossip, or they can go to the one that wronged them and say, hey, this hurt, which is what Terri did. That's great. And the other person responded well. So
sometimes it's these aren't hard and fast rules, because sometimes it's about where the person is. Like the thing, like you say, we want to know the things to not to say. But sometimes it hits you because of where you are. And I had another example of a young friend who had no kids, and she was afraid to get pregnant. And she shared with me that one of her fears was having a child like Erin. And I was not in a place at that moment where I could process that with her. I understood what she meant. I understood the fear. Like, I had the fears of, like, God, I can't have a child with special needs. I won't know what to do. So it was a legitimate, if you will say, like, fear, like just the unknown. But I personally, emotionally, whatever it was, I don't even remember what all was going. I could not process that with her because all I heard was, I cannot have a child like you have. And I'm like, how could anyone look at Erin and not want to conceive because you might have an Erin? Erin's amazing. So I told her, like, I understand what you're processing, and I just may not be the person to process this with you. And she apologized, and I was like, it's fine. Like, I get it, but just where I was, it hit me, I think different than maybe further down the road. And I think that's okay. Like, to say, I get it and I understand, but can you process this with another friend? I love you. And for that person not to be, because it would make sense. Like, she probably wants me to tell her all the good, and I just couldn't. All I heard was, you don't want to have a baby because you're afraid to have a kid like mine.
Yeah.
So in that sense, the way that we will get hurt is the same way everybody gets hurt in relationships, where they will just say things insensitively or that they don't understand, and you just got to have this gracious, posture towards one another. But for a practical tip to be helpful when you know somebody that has special needs, just be really slow to assume. Like, assume a diagnosis, assume a situation, just ask questions.
Yeah.
That's the safest play. And you have to be willing to, because there's some people that want to be known as the expert on everything. And so they just think that they're going to be the expert on special needs because they read an article or whatnot. And anyways, just lay down your pride. Don't assume you know the story, the diagnosis, the struggle, and just ask questions. Ask questions that you're going to go, I should know the answer to this, but what is autism again? Does your son have autism? No, what does your son have? Or even instead of just saying, does your son have this particular thing? Just ask the question, hey, so we've noticed that, there's something, different about your son or daughter. Can you just tell me what they have or what they, just ask the question, right? And it avoids so many of these stupid, unfortunate.
My nephew has autism, and I was like, great, my son doesn't. It just is like, stop diagnosing him, and let's not do that. So just don't diagnose. And it could be that you run into someone that doesn't want you to ask. But I think most people want to be known. They want their story to be heard. They want to be seen. And so when you ask a question, it's life-giving for someone to go, oh, you care enough to ask, you want to know, and then they can tell you her story.
Yeah. It's so good to talk about the struggles. I think, for parents who are listening who do have special needs children, you talk about the aloneness, and this helps them to realize, hey, we're not alone in this. But also our Christian faith, provides a theology of suffering or trials that also tells us, I'm reminded of James chapter 1, consider it all joy when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And so what are the things that you guys can look at and say, you know what, these have been the real joys and these have been the blessings that have come through having a special needs child and some of the challenges that come with it?
Yeah. You got something you want to say?
I mean, for me, it's always been like really early on, and I don't even know how this sounds coming out. Nothing in my life, and Erin was my first child, so maybe this is true for most parents when you become but nothing has made me more dependent on the God of everything, God of the universe, and the God that loves us and knows Erin. Nothing pushes me to him more than he's one of 100. What? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so what a gift to have Erin, even though in the struggles and it's hard, but it's hard to raise the other 4 too. Like, what a gift to remind me on the daily you cannot do this. You have no ability in yourself to do this. And maybe I would have that if I was just a parent. Maybe some parents can resonate with that. I think for my own personality, the tendency would be that I would think I was a pretty good parent. I'm doing this well if I had all neurotypical kids. But I don't have all neurotypical kids, and Erin just pushes me to the feet of Jesus more than anything in my life. Always has. And I'm just like, what a gift, because where else should I be? Where else can I go? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how I want to answer that. You have to, I mean, I think this is true for anybody, but you have to have a good theology of suffering if you have a child with special needs. You just really do. Because why God, when it's your son, it hits you in a different way, and so you definitely need to have a good understanding of suffering, but you also need to have a good understanding of what makes life meaningful. That a lot of our story with Erin was thrown into that book that I wrote, Why You Matter, because Erin's probably, who knows, but might not get married. Probably more likely than not won't get married. He's not going to know the joy of reading a classic novel. He loves baseball, but he has to play on like a special needs organized team because just the way the world is. So if you look at what, kind of a worldly standard, what makes life meaningful, and then you look at what your son is going to be able to have, and then you have to wrestle with, is God good in all this? It really can send you into a really, really dark place. But if you understand why God is good and there is evil and how those two coexist, and if you understand what it is to be made in the image of God and what leads to a meaningful life, it allows you to weather the hardship and fight for the joy that can be found in the midst of this. So this is why, Brett, the work that our families are involved in with worldview and theology is so important and so practical. I think for my family, the understanding of these things has allowed us to survive the hardship and look for that joy in the midst of it. So some of this is why I said I don't know how I want to answer this, because I don't know how it's going to sound, right? It could be overly sarcastic. But the way, I grew up, I played sports, high
Mike,
school.
there's no such thing. There's no such thing as overly sarcastic.
But I'm trying to think of what's the right way to, I'm just going to say, and if it's horrible, it's horrible. But like, I grew up playing sports, played in high school, played in college. I wish I could capture fully what I think when I see someone's sticker on the car that talks about their all-star, Little League all-star kid. Like the tension here, the balance here, right? Where should you be upset? You should be proud if you have a Little League all-star kid, right? You should. Of course, we won't have that with Erin. And so for someone like me, even just to live in this tension of how to be grateful for good things, but not idolize good things, is a result of having a child with special needs when you have a sound theology of things like suffering. So I think if that was a convoluted way simply for me to say, I think for me anyways, having a son with special needs has allowed me to be better at enjoying good things without making them ultimate things or turning them into idols.
Wow. So if someone's listening right now, a parent or grandparent who recently got a diagnosis for their child or grandchild, or maybe even they got a year ago, but they're still just kind of figuring this out, and they're wrestling with their theology. They're wrestling with, do I really believe God is good? How do I move forward? How do I not go in despair in thinking about some of the things you mentioned, both of you, about just knowing Erin's limits. What's some encouragement you would give to someone listening right now on what to do, what to read, who to turn to? Anything that comes to mind.
Yeah, that I think the first thing is to realize that God is big enough to handle my personality. I'm extroverted. I am outgoing, and what comes with that for me is I feel things deep. I feel them hard. My feelings are very high when they're high, and they can be low when they're low. And so for me, it was in this realization that God can handle all of me. God can handle my anger about a situation. God can handle my sadness. God can handle my grief. God can handle my questions. God can handle when I'm in the living room at 5 o'clock a.m. and I'm telling him, I don't trust you. I don't trust you. And I'm sorry, but I don't. I can't trust the neurologist. I can't trust Emory Neuroscience. I can't trust, how am I supposed to trust you? I have to do all of this myself. And God can handle that. If I just hold that in, I'm not having a relationship with God. I'm not talking to him. I'm not doing this with him. He's there. He's not going to abandon me. And he's not going to leave me. But I'm not doing it with him. If I know God can handle all of me, all the crazy, all the things, all the emotions, and I can give that to him, then we can walk this together. And then that's one of the biggest things for me, realizing and not feeling guilty about emotions, because you can feel a lot of things. I feel a lot of things, but I don't have to live what I feel. There's a growing for me of learning how to walk in the tension. I can feel sad and I don't have to live sad. I can feel frustrated and I don't have to live frustrated. And you can do both of those, and I cannot do that without him and doing that with him. And then the other just practical things for me are take care of yourself. Do things that you can control. Exercise and eat healthy. I mean, I know that sounds so cliche and so want, but I can control that. And that makes me feel better. And I'm a better person and a better parent, a better friend. And take time for yourself. Have friends. Yeah. I don't know if I have anything else.
No, that's good. So, right, one of the, I think, recurring themes of this talk is just don't withdraw. And you can withdraw from the Lord, or do like what Terri said and allow him into your life in that sense, where you tell them what you're feeling. And, there's, of course, biblical warrant for this. You read in the book of Job, and Job basically says to God, stop bullying me. Why are you bullying me? And so it's, we have a scriptural basis to be raw and honest with our feelings. So don't withdraw, but you can withdraw from idiots. So if you find people in your life that just offer nothing but
See?
Yeah. Well, we all know they're idiots made in the image of God. I mean, we got to correct
but
theology
you can
here.
withdraw from them. I mean, if you just don't, it's another way of saying you don't have to be surrounded by people that have nothing but Christian sound bites and cliches to give you. Like, sing a little bit louder, pray a little bit harder, open up to people, and find some people that can handle your grief. A couple, I think, helpful books on this. One is by J.P. Moreland, Finding Quiet. That's what it's called, right?
Mhm.
Finding Quiet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's a helpful book because it kind of goes through the theology, the psychology, and even the medical aspect of when you're suffering from anxiety. And so more than even if you just have anxiety, if you have a hard time of really controlling your thoughts kind of thing, I think that book can be helpful. I know I'm the president of the C.S. Lewis Society, so this feels a bit cliche, but I love Lewis's The Problem of Pain and A Grief Observed. And those are two books that address this topic, but from really different perspectives, right? The Problem of Pain is kind of a classic Lewis philosophical, apologetic treatment of the subject. And then he writes A Grief Observed, of course, after his wife dies. And so those are short books too. And Lewis is a great writer. So if somebody was looking for a place to start with, how do I kind of control my thoughts? How do I get a handle on I'm kind of spiraling and need to have a starting place to begin developing a theology of suffering and pain, I'd go to Lewis. Those are some two accessible books there.
Yeah, those are great resources. In fact, we did a podcast interview with JP on his book, Finding Quiet. So if anyone listening wants to go hunt down that interview, it's in our podcast archives there. And I was thinking about the whole idiot thing. I was thinking the biblical, probably the more biblical term is fool, right? But the Bible does talk about staying away from the fool. So anyway, those are some really good practical things. I mean, we could go on and on. This has been already a very rich interview. And, I think one thing, just kind of watching you guys share, just seeing almost kind of just seeing the relationship, the strength of your relationship together as you've walked through this has been inspiring as well. But thank you guys for sharing your story with us. For those who want to get a hold of you, could you just share your mobile numbers with everyone? I'm just kidding.
Oh my gosh.
No, I'm sorry.
Did we not warn you?
We're going to
about
post that on the screen. I'll post that on there. No, if you want to find out more about the work that the Sherrards are doing through Apologetics Inc., which is still the C.S. Lewis Society right now, but go to apologetics.org and find out more about what they're doing. But guys, thank you so much for the interview.
Hey, it's good.
Guys.
It's good seeing you.
Maven exists to help the next generation know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty for the cause of Christ. To find out more, check out maventruth.com.